This podcast is part of the Shrimp Queen Network.
Visit facebook.com/Shrimp Queen Network to see more great podcasts.
Hear them.
Hear more great podcasts.
Good job.
Thanks for listening. Hello and welcome back to the 10 for 10 files.
Hello.
I think it was going to be
I don't do lists of 10 ever anymore.
Yeah, this is our first list of 10 in 3 episodes.
Oh, because Rocky. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. I started a trend.
Anyway, so this is a show within a show that secretly started when I covered serial killers, and now we're going on to the... I can actually say top 10 because there is some form of ranking because it's based on like mystery.
It's
going to
be a creepy episode, but not like a
It's dark, but it's not.
It's
we're not going
mystery.
into the.
It's mystery.
It's not from the perspective of the killer this time, so we can actually talk about it lightly.
Mystery.
I am your resident
person.
Fuck, I forgot. Agent Mulder.
Boy, man.
This is my resident agent Scully.
I've never seen X-Files, guys.
Well,
but I've been told that
and
one of my haircuts looked exactly like hers.
Yeah, it did. Anyway, so for today's episode, I'm trying to get into it really fast because it's a lot to cover. It's my longest list I've ever written.
Not like number wise. Yeah, in terms of detail.
16 pages. 16 pages long.
Detail. Okay, start. Goodbye.
This is longer than probably any assignment I've ever had to do for school, too.
I say we get the ball rolling.
All right, so quick ranking criteria. All cases must be considered unsolved. You didn't
actually say what you're doing.
I said top 10 unsolved mysteries.
Oh, okay.
Or unsolved murders. Top 10 mysterious unsolved murders. There we go.
You got it. In America or anywhere?
It's international.
There you go.
So all cases must be considered unsolved / still open and investigated. I rank them by how baffling the mystery is, the cultural impact the murders had, as well as the investigation if it was publicized, the implied horror and creepiness of the murders, because 2 of them are pretty damn creepy, how frustrating it is that it wasn't solved, either that it's like, God, if that happened now, that would be solved in a second.
Jesus Christ, it's so fucking obvious.
Or it's really, really obvious. And why isn't it solved? Okay, I have honorable mentions, but I'm just running through them real quick. The Axemen of New Orleans, the 9 hikers of the Dyatlov Pass, Ken McElroy, Jimmy Hoffa, Natalie Wood, Tamim Shud, a.k.a. the Somerton Man, and the Tylenol poisonings.
Oh, I actually think there's one on here that me and you have never talked about that I might know the story of. Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Because of a TV show that I watched.
Number 10 is one that's pretty close to home for Jess and I, literally close. So it's number 10 is The Case of the Boy in the Box. The story is on February 25th, 1957 in Fox Chase, Pennsylvania, a student from LaSalle College discovered the remains...
Sorry, those both close to home for me.
Yeah, I know. The remains of an unidentified boy between the ages of 3 and 7 in a cardboard box. He was naked and beaten with close-cropped hair, which may have just been cut post-mortem. No family or friends ever reported a missing boy matching his description. In fact, no one ever came forward with any form of actionable evidence. No, we don't even know his name. So not only do we not know who killed him, we don't know who he is.
Don't know his age.
The Philadelphia Inquirer actually printed and posted 400,000 flyers around Philadelphia.
Go Inquirer.
And even sent out one with every single gas bill that was sent out in and around the city. 270 police academy recruits poured over the crime scene, only discovering a man's blue corduroy cap, a child's scarf, and a man's handkerchief with the letter G inscribed upon it, but none of those clues ever turned up anything. It might also be worth mentioning he was found in the middle of a forest. Actually, he was found by 2 people. Initially, he was found by someone who was looking for traps, who was checking his fox traps or something like that, and he found it and was just like, not touching that, and went home.
Didn't even tell the police?
No, and then another person found him, waited a day before calling the police. Because,
why?
I mean, if you find someone dead in a box, odds are you're going to be the first suspect and you don't want to have to deal with it. So the guy who initially found him came out later, said, yeah, I did find him.
Sorry.
So the boy is currently buried in Ivy Hill Cemetery in Cedarbrook, Pennsylvania, and his case remains open and investigated to this day. I'm not going to say exactly.
What year was this again?
1957. I'm not going to say exactly how far away that is from us, but let's just say it's a very, very easy drive, and I used to drive by it every single day when I had a different job and lived somewhere else, but still pretty close.
Okay, so it's close to us. That's
like,
all.
we could literally stop this recording.
I know, that's all.
Go take a picture with the grave, come back, and within like the span of an hour.
Why would we take a picture with the grave? That's fucked up, buddy.
We should post that on Facebook.
No.
Okay, let's get into the theories. His death, number one, his death was an accident at a nearby foster home, and the father at this home and the stepdaughter disposed of the body to avoid admitting that she was his unwed mother.
Are there any suspects? Okay.
Not really.
That's what I was just
wondering. Well, these are like the biggest suspects, but we don't know their names. So Remington Bristow, a medical examiner, employee obsessed with the case, he literally studied it from the day it came across him till the day he died in, I think, the early 90s, discovered a bassinet that would have been sold in the box the boy was stuffed in, along with clothes and blankets similar to those the boy was wrapped in at an estate sale at the home. So it was a bassinet box that he was buried in, which is pretty sad. Yeah. Only 29 of those were sent out from a local JCPenney, but every single person who bought one bought it with cash, so there was no paper trail. Which makes sense for the time. Nobody had credit cards and checks weren't, if you had cash, you just pay cash.
Yeah.
Police were not able to find any definite links between the boy and the foster family, and a DNA test actually showed that the stepdaughter was definitely not the boy's mother. Now, if you read Wikipedia, someone has edited this to say that she was his mother and that they have a definite link and all this stuff. So
Wikipedia,
go somewhere else.
That's
the first time I've ever seen something blatantly wrong on Wikipedia in my life, though.
I mean, I have just like when like people would be like, yo, I was just on Wikipedia, go look this up, see what it says. And then 2 minutes later, it'd be just gone.
The next theory. A woman named M, or Martha, came forward in February of 2002, claiming that her abusive mother had bought the boy in 1954, put him through years of physical torture and sexual abuse, and ultimately accidentally killed him in a fit of rage by slamming him on the floor. A male witness corroborated the story in 1957 after he'd tried to help. So this was initially right after the body was found. He said that he tried to help this girl's alleged mother when he saw her struggling with something in the back of her car, the box, and she told him basically to fuck off, and he did.
Lady.
He was even able to identify
but he
her.
never thought to like come up with that before because
no, he did. He did. Reported it in 1957. So that's why when she came forward in 2002.
Okay.
So he actually got the license plate of the car and it matched her mother's. But what kind of discredits it is that M had a history of serious mental illness. Her former neighbors claimed to never have seen a boy in or around the house in the past, and there's no actual hard evidence to prove any of M's true story. And actually, shortly before his murder, there is an account of someone whose dad was renting out, I think, an apartment or a room to some guy who casually mentioned in passing that he just sold his son. So that would be, that would corroborate that story. So why is it on the list? Why is it number 10? So the case gripped the city and the nation for a while in the 1950s and even resurfaces every couple of years with new theories being put forth. Like I think the most recent break in the case is like 2016 or something like that.
Jesus.
He was dubbed America's Unknown Child, and that's what his gravestone says.
America's Unknown Child?
Yeah.
Wow.
So the sheer brutality of doing this to a child is actually jaw-dropping, as well as the fact that no family member ever came forward claiming to know him or report him missing adds to the mystery and the tragedy, as this points to the fact that his family...
That, like, not just Philadelphia, obviously, was, like, keeping up with it. Like, it had to have gotten to...
National attention, yeah. National attention.
Nobody?
But the fact that nobody claimed him kind of hints to the fact that it was probably a family member or his family that did this to him.
Yeah. Or
were informed.
Yeah.
Or involved, in any way, shape, or form. So that is number 10, the case of the boy in the box. I accidentally I started to write each one, and then I realized I was kind of writing each one like the title of like a mystery story, like a Sherlock Holmes novel. So I just kind of kept going with that.
Okay.
So number 9.
Don't do that voice, please, and thank you. The
disappearance of the Sodder children. This is not an official murder, but I believe that they were murdered. So I'm counting it as a murder, and it's really interesting.
I just have a quick question. Is one of them happen to be a girl, like a lady who was found?
Possibly.
Yeah?
possibly.
That's the only one. Okay, sorry, guys. We'll get...
So the story, the Sodder family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia, burned to the ground on Christmas Eve of 1945. George Sodder, his wife Jenny, and 9 of their 10 kids lived in the house at the time. Both parents and 4 of their children escaped the fire. The 5 other children were never seen ever again.
Oh, God.
The parents and the remaining children never rebuilt the house and spent the rest of their lives theorizing and trying to find the 5 children. Marion, the oldest daughter...
To, like, find them?
Yeah, so this is the night of Christmas Eve. Marion, the oldest daughter...
remains?
Yeah, I'll get to that.
Okay.
I'll get to that.
So I was going to say, how would they be looking? I would just assume fire.
Yeah. So Marion, the oldest daughter, had bought 3 of the younger girls, Martha, Jenny Jr., I'll call her, and Betty, with new toys for Christmas. So they asked their mom if they could stay up later than normal that night to play with them. They were allowed to if their older brothers, Maurice and Louis, remembered to put the cows out and feed the chickens before going to bed, and they did. Jenny, the mom... Jenny Sr., I'll say, took the youngest
it would just be Jenny.
daughter, Sylvia.
Senior would be a grandmother.
With her to bed soon after. Sylvia was 2 at this point. George and the 2 oldest boys, John and George Jr., were already asleep upstairs. The telephone rang at 12:30 a.m., and Jenny answered it and heard a woman's voice, who she didn't recognize, asking to speak with someone she didn't know. Jenny noted the sound of laughter and clinking glasses in the background, along with the woman's weird laugh once she was told that person wasn't there. So Jenny also noticed at this point that the lights were on downstairs still.
Okay.
The curtains hadn't been closed, and Marion was asleep on the couch. So she went downstairs, turned the lights off, and closed the curtains.
Okay.
And assumed that the other kids had gone up to the attic to sleep, which is where they slept.
Well, a lot of kids.
Yeah. So Jenny woke again at 1:30 a.m. smelling smoke. Shortly after she went upstairs after turning the lights off, she heard something hit the roof and roll down it. And then at 1:30 a.m., she woke up smelling smoke and discovered George's office was on fire. Okay. She woke George, John, Marion, George Jr., and Sylvia and escaped the house with them. So the 2-year-old got out, the 2 older brothers, and the oldest sister.
Try to get the other ones, or...
Well, none of them had heard any response when they were yelling to the children in the attic to get out of the house. They didn't hear anything upstairs. Okay. So even if the kids got trapped up there and died, they would have heard them screaming.
Yeah.
So Marion ran to a neighbor's house to call the fire department as the house's phone wasn't working. All efforts to seek help were unexpectedly complicated as the fire department were slow in responding. They showed up 7 hours later. And even it was Christmas time, so they were short-staffed. But
still.
It was like 2 miles away. Like literally like...
Fire would be... it would be done.
The house burnt down in 45 minutes.
So what, were they just like waiting outside for them?
Yeah, there's more. Even a nearby driver saw the blaze and drove to a tavern to call it in, but couldn't because he couldn't reach the operator. The entire house burned down in 45 minutes before the fire department arrived later that morning, as I said. So during the fire, George and the 2 older boys tried to save the kids they assumed were in the attic, the 5 children, with the family's ladder, but couldn't find it anywhere. It wasn't in its usual spot. They couldn't find it anywhere on the property at this point. None of the children's bodies or bones were found in the wreckage of the house. In a 1949 excavation, because after the house burned down, instead of rebuilding, George just mowed it over with a, what is it called? Bulldozer, something like that.
I'm just thinking cement.
And so a 1949 excavation did turn up vertebrae bones in the side of the house, but they were of someone too old to be any of the children. The oldest child that was missing was 14. These bones were of someone who was at least 22 or 23.
So it could have been whoever set the fire.
And had probably been buried there before the house was ever built.
Never mind.
Just under.
Never mind.
Yeah.
That mystery solved.
So a billboard with all the children's pictures and a lot of details about them, including the fact that the parents believe they weren't dead, was funded and maintained by the Sodder parents until Jenny's death in the 80s.
Okay. What year was the fire again? Sorry.
1945.
Okay. Jeez.
So is there anything else interesting at that? No. Theories. The official record states that the children died in the house fire. They were all issued death certificates despite the fact that there was no body.
Absolutely no remains.
That was a result of faulty...
burned down, you would still find something.
Yeah, I'll get to that. That was a result of faulty wiring, but no bodies were ever found. And at the temperature the house was burning, and given the time that it took to burn down, there definitely would have been remains. In fact, cremations are done at a higher temperature and for 2 hours, and there's still sometimes bone fragments. So there definitely would have been bodies.
Yeah.
The Sodders had literally just had the house professionally inspected and rewired a few days before the fire, and it was cleared, good to go.
What about that thing that hit the roof?
Could have been a Molotov cocktail.
Yeah.
There is another...
I was just going to say, like...
There's another mystery that comes later that I will try to link back to this one.
Okay.
So George Sodder, who, little bit of background on him, he was born in Italy and left for unknown reasons. And while there and while in the town that they lived in, Fayetteville, which had a very large Italian community, he was extremely, extremely critical of the Sicilian mob and Benito Mussolini, who was the dictator when he left and wasn't anymore at this point because I think he'd just been overthrown in World War II. So he thinks that someone did this to the house and kidnapped his other children to raise them or kill them or just put them somewhere else.
Just to like destroy his
Specifically, family. He believes it was the Sicilian mafia because of his outspoken criticism. Yeah. And a few days before the fire, an insurance salesman who, well, showed up to the house trying to sell him life insurance or whatever insurance. And George was like, no, thank you. The insurance salesman was like, you know what, fuck you, dude. Guess what? One day your house is going to burn and all of your children are going to burn with it.
Wow.
And the case was closed because it was put in front of a local jury and like a judge. Mm-hmm. And the jury voted that it was not worth investigating any further. And that salesman happened to be on the jury.
Oh my God.
So it was probably a cover-up. The ladder was later found in an embankment 75 feet away from the home. After the initial fire, they went back to investigate and someone had moved it. If faulty wiring were the cause, then the house would have lost power, but all of the Christmas lights remained on in the early stages of the fire, and obviously Jenny saw the lights on and received a call. The phone line, believed to have been destroyed by the fire, was later found to have been manually cut. Their truck wouldn't start. It was allegedly sabotaged. And police seemed strangely reluctant to investigate further. Sodder even wrote to the FBI and received a letter personally from J. Edgar Hoover, who was the director of the FBI at the time, who said he would gladly send agents down if the local police requested them, but the police said, no thanks, bye, and that's it. Even though that would they could have just let him in.
What about the phone call?
Well, some people think that was done by an accomplice to check to see if they were home.
Oh, okay.
Kind of like the strangers.
Oh, God. I hate that.
They're going to come up later, too.
Oh.
So the Sodders were actually sent an anonymous photo of a man who looked remarkably like their son Louis would have been at that point in time during the 60s. Mm-hmm. And even George saw a picture of school children in New York City. And one of them looked a lot like one of his daughters. So he drove all the way up to New York. And nobody in the school or the family would let him see her, which is pretty strange. Because even like if it was your child, you would say, yeah, look, this is my child. These are birth records. This is my kid. You would prove it, right? And people have claimed, like a waitress nearby claimed that she saw the kids with two couples and that the couples were or like trying to stay at a hotel. And she was trying to strike up conversation with the kids because it was 5 kids. Mm-hmm. And like the man that was with them kind of just gave her a death glare and was
I was gonna say waitresses
nah. And then they left early the next morning. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of conflicting evidence. So this case is insane and has way more details than I've put here, if you can believe. By the way, almost every case that I've covered has been covered by BuzzFeed Unsolved or Do Go On, the podcast. A lot of them have a lot of overlap. So if you hear something that you're interested in, go and check out their episodes. They go way more in depth than I can because I don't have the time right now. Yeah. It captured the attention of many, but has fallen into obscurity, unfortunately. Mm. I think it's a really interesting story.
I think they're alive.
I think they were possibly alive for a little, but the fact that
they were just separated,
even when they were older, they never contacted their parents.
How young was the youngest one?
14.
Oh, that was the youngest?
Sorry. The youngest was 5.
Oh, because I was going to say the 14. Younger kids, I mean, there are situations in kidnapping where the younger they are, the less they tend to start to forget kind of about.
But some people even think that they might have been taken back to Italy by the Sicilian mob and raised there.
Yeah.
And that's why they couldn't contact their parents. The only one alive right now is Sylvia, the one who was 2 years old at the time. And she's still maintaining a website and everything. And her daughter has said that once Sylvia dies, she's going to continue the investigation. The fact that no bodies were present and the police's desire to put the case to rest without any actual evidence supporting their theory lends to George's theory that they had been paid off or threatened by someone with serious power. So it just kind of invites controversy.
I'd say more.
And that's why it's number 9.
Maybe they were like threatening their other siblings.
Yeah. Something like that.
So many fucking kids.
Number 8. The murders of Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls. The stories and their theories.
I just wasn't expecting these ones.
So for Tupac.
I was expecting like really like obscure stories that maybe like
No, this one is crazy. No, and I'll tell you why after.
I wasn't expecting it at all. Because when you said like Tupac, I was like, wow, what a strange... Who has that name?
Here we go. So Tupac attended the Bruce Sheldon versus Mike Tyson fight.
Is he like still alive?
That's one of the theories. Okay. With Suge Knight at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. The Tupac got into a fight in the lobby of the hotel with an alleged Crips gang member who'd attacked one of Knight's associates earlier that night. After the fight, Tupac was driving to Club 662.
You're really stumbling over words.
Sorry, with Knight and rode in the passenger seat of Knight's 1996 black BMW 750 IL sedan. They stopped at a red light on the boulevard at 11:15 p.m. when a 4-door white Cadillac pulled up next to them and opened fire, hitting Tupac 4 times and actually hitting Suge Knight in the head. But he didn't die. It was like a ricochet, so it just kind of like hit him in the head and it was fine. Shakur died from internal bleeding on September 13th, 1996, a few days after the shooting, in the ICU of the University Medical Center of Southern Nevada. And he was, a big musical star.
Really?
Basically reinvented rap at that
Never
point.
heard of him.
So theories, that it was Chuck Phillips. This is Chuck Phillips of the Los Angeles Times theory. He didn't commit the murder. I don't think he could have done that. He spent a year researching and investigating for an article. Mm-hmm. He thinks that Tupac was killed by the Southside Crips in retaliation for his attack of Orlando Anderson earlier that night, the Crips member who we saw in the lobby. He believes that Anderson was the one who actually fired the shots that killed Tupac, and that the notorious B.I.G. Biggie actually may have had some involvement with his death at that point and might have told him to do it. Mm-hmm. The other is that Suge Knight was involved. He was the CEO of Death Row Records, and he had Tupac killed so that he couldn't switch record labels before releasing his next album, because there was apparently talk that he might do that. Mm-hmm. The next is that the FBI did it to end violent rap culture.
What the fuck?
And the East versus West mentality allegedly stemming from it. And the final one is that he is not dead and he lives in someone's basement somewhere.
Why a basement? Why can't he be living large somewhere?
There's pictures of him with like Rihanna allegedly.
Wasn't he a hologram
Whoa, I just got a text.
in the last few years at some award show?
It says it's from the FBI and they say stay where you are.
Wasn't he a hologram recently?
Yeah, he was brought back in hologram form, and then he was in a not very good biopic about him called All Eyes on Me.
Oh God,
it's with a Z.
I know.
All right, the notorious B.I.G. So after Tupac's murder, Biggie was worried for his own life. He went to California to promote his upcoming album, ironically called Life After Death, in February of 1997. On March 8th, 1997, he presented an award to Toni Braxton at the Soul Train Musical Awards in L.A., then went to a party hosted by Vibe and Quest Records at the Peterson Automotive Museum in LA. He left the party at 12:30.
You're fumbling so hard with your words.
I need to have a drink.
Yeah. Shit, that is fresh.
It is fresh.
Go on.
He left the party at 12:30 a.m. on March 9th, 1997, after it was closed by the fire department, who said that it was too crowded for the venue. He and his entourage traveled in 2 GMC Yukons to get back to his hotel. The truck that Biggie was in was traveling the truck that Biggie was traveling in stopped at a red light 50 yards from the museum. A black Chevy Impala pulled up alongside the car. The driver, an very, very specific description. An African-American man dressed in a blue suit with a bow tie rolled down his window, produced a 9mm pistol, and shot at Biggie's truck. 4 bullets hit Biggie, and he was rushed to the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center and was pronounced dead on arrival at 1:15 a.m. I know, 4, and it was both at a stopped red light. Yeah. They were in the car with other people. This ain't it, boss. So here are some theories. Suge Knight ordered Biggie's murder in retaliation for Shakur's death. The FBI did it for the same reasons that they allegedly killed Tupac. P. Diddy did it, even though he was in Biggie's...
D. Piddy?
Yeah, he was in Biggie's entourage after seeing the skyrocketing of Tupac's record sales after his death. It is worth noting that Diddy was actually in Biggie's entourage that night, but chose not to travel in the same vehicle as him.
His real name is...
Puff Daddy.
Sean Combs?
Yes.
Okay. I like when I said, wait, his real name, you went to Puff Daddy. That's another name for him, but his real name is Sean Combs.
So, but as I said, Diddy elected not to travel in the same car as Biggie that night when he was offered. He said, "No thanks. I'll take the fun V."
No thanks, Biggie.
Which is quoted in Iron Man. And again, that Biggie isn't really dead, and he's, out there living somewhere secretly.
Oh, they're hanging out together? They're buds?
Well, they were buds initially, and then a rivalry started. So,
isn't that how it always goes?
Here's why it's on the list. So both.
What is? Are you?
I don't know.
Are you having a stroke?
The FBI shot me with something not too long ago. Probably.
Are you having a stroke?
The murders are truly jarring. The similarities in their murders, specifically the short amount of time between their deaths, only 7 months, and their shared history invariably has us creating links between the incidents
and their actual.
Yeah, I mean their professions. Yes. The fact that neither has been solved despite the celebrity of both victims, the public settings of their murders, and the copious amounts of eyewitnesses and evidence at both crime scenes is frustratingly mysterious.
Yet nobody.
It makes you think that it was a cover-up because how the hell were 2 of the biggest stars of the time
or that they paid
murdered in the middle of the street
to a false murder? They were paid.
And both murders are ingrained into American pop culture and the zeitgeist of music and specifically rap culture because everybody knows Tupac and Biggie now. Yeah. I mean, it makes you think, if they hadn't been murdered, would they be nearly as famous nowadays?
I think so.
You don't know.
I think so.
Practically everybody has a theory about Tupac and Biggie. What's your theory?
I'm going with FBI.
It was the FBI that did it?
No, hold on. No, the FBI set up the situation, paid all the so-called witnesses.
The situation.
And they are actually... working for the FBI now.
They're in Men in Black.
Undercover. Yeah.
That's what he was wearing a blue suit. They're the natural enemies of the Men in Black.
Yeah. So
the Men in Blue.
So they're alive. And yes, it was the FBI, but the FBI was doing it so that they could come and work for them. That's my theory.
I get why getting Tupac to come work for you because
Tupac was getting bored for the first 6 months and he was like, you need to get me a friend. You need to get me a friend partner. Now. And they're like, all right, give us a little bit of time.
He's from the West Coast. He's from the East Coast. Stop. They're both rappers, and now they're both allegedly dead. It's... Shit, I couldn't think of a good title in time. I was thinking rappers in crime instead of, partners in crime. I hate you. It was not that good.
What's your theory?
Just I like the idea. I mean, I think it was... perhaps related to the Anderson thing, and that maybe Biggie was killed in retaliation because he was allegedly involved in Tupac's death. That does make sense.
There's no way that it was just pure chance, coincidence.
But also, if he was killed in retaliation, they might have done it in a similar way to Tupac, like
as like
a
like
a fuck you.
Did.
Yeah, exactly.
And so his buddies
to show kind of like everybody.
So that they would show his buddies, you did this to him. We'll do the same.
But also, I mean, the FBI theory does work. The FBI probably would have gotten the local fire department to be like, Biggie, get out. We got to shut down this party. There's too many people in it.
Yeah.
It's not Biggie enough for all of them.
Stop.
All right. Number 7 is one of the creepy ones.
Is it?
Sorry.
The one that I was thinking about?
No.
God damn.
Number 7
is... It the Strangers one?
No. The Horror of the Hinterkaifeck Farm. This one's international.
Oh, it's the first international one? Where is it?
It's probably the oldest, too. On April 4th, 1922,
Oh, wow.
Albert Hoffner traveled to the somewhat remote location of Hinterkaifeck Farm, located in modern-day Weidhofen, Bavaria, Germany, to repair the family's wood chopper. He waited an hour on the farm, but didn't see any of the members of the family, not Father Andreas Gruber, Mother Kaisela, 72, Andreas Gruber, 63, their widowed daughter, Victoria Gabriel, 35, Victoria's kids, Kaisela Jr., 7, and Joseph, 2.
So sorry, I thought that you just said Godzilla.
Kaisela.
Oh my god.
I'm calling her Kaisela Jr.
What the fuck?
Or the family's new maid, Maria Baumgartner, 19...
And how is this man related to them?
44. He was supposed to come out and fix their food chopper. Fruit chopper. Yeah, food chopper.
Wood chopper?
Food chopper.
I'm pretty sure you said wood earlier.
Did I say wood? Maybe it is wood. Maybe I read it as food. Some sort of
fuck
chopper.
Is a food chopper?
I don't know. I assumed it was something from the 1920s.
Just a person. A food chopper is just a person. You
food
use your
wood
hands.
chopper. We'll Google it later. And he couldn't even see the family's new maid, Maria Baumgartner, who was 44. Albert eventually...
Did he already know them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Albert eventually gave up waiting and spent the next 4.5 hours on the apparently desolate farm fixing the chopper before heading home. Albert then sent his sons back to the farm later that day, and when the two couldn't find anything, local guide Lorenz Schlittenbauer, Michael Pohl, and Jacob Siegel went to investigate. The three found the mutilated bodies of Andreas, Kaisela, Victoria, and the younger Kaisela in the family barn, stacked up on top of one another. And the bodies of Maria and Joseph in the house. Maria was in her bedroom. Joseph was still in his cradle.
Aww.
Joseph, yeah.
How old was he? You didn't tell me his age.
2.
I didn't hear it. Oh my god.
The family had all been killed with a mattock, which is like kind of like a pickaxe. Yeah. It's like a pickaxe on one side and then flat on the other side. It is believed that the family were killed on the night of March 31st into April 1st, 1922, 4 days before what was his name? Albert
Something
got to
with
the
an A.
farm.
Yeah.
6 months prior to their murders, the family's former maid quit, claiming that she thought the farm was haunted as she constantly heard voices and movement around the house's attic in the dead of the night. They said, okay, bye.
I don't like
And then a couple weeks before the murder, they started hearing noises too. A few days before, the family also noticed that a set of house keys had gone missing. And this is the creepiest part to me. Andreas noted to some friends a few days before.
Andreas?
He's the father.
Okay.
A few days before the murders, that he'd awoken one morning to see a set of tracks coming towards the farm from the edge of the nearby forest.
Ugh.
But no tracks returning back to the forest. Which
I don't like
is
it.
terrifying.
Stop.
Ironically,
There's something behind me and I don't like it.
Maria literally had just started on the day of the murders. She was the replacement for the one who had left.
Oh,
she
fuck.
got there March 31st. So the last person to see
fools?
the last person to see the family alive was Maria's sister.
I do not like that shit at all. Oh my god, no, I feel like someone's behind me now.
This was actually, I'm surprised this hasn't been turned into a movie. It lends itself so perfectly to a movie. The closest thing is they did an episode of Lore about it in the most recent season. I haven't watched it, but I've heard it's not that good.
I just wanted to watch the episode
But also,
with Holland Roden.
I don't want to watch a 2-year-old get killed or a 7-year-old.
Not that shit at all. But no, I do want to watch the episode with Holland Roden. She's in the one where it's like
Yeah, that one's sad. It's about changelings. Yeah. Okay. So given the lack of solid evidence, it is theorized, no one really knows when this happened, that, it was definitely obvious that Andreas, Kaisela Sr., Victoria, and Kaisela II were all killed in the barn. It is theorized that each of them were lured into the barn and then killed one by one, because no one can take on 4 people at once. It was definitely probably one person. Unless
it wasn't human.
Exactly. That's what the lore episode is kind of about. It is even believed that the younger Kaisela was found with clumps of her own hair in her hands. So it's kind of believed that she was present for one of the killings and tore her own hair out in fear.
Yeah.
Just kind of like standing there. After the 4 were killed in the barn, the killer or killers went into the house and dispatched the other 2.
That they couldn't lure.
The killers then stayed in the house during the next 4-ish days because the mail was being taken in, smoke was seen billowing from the house's chimney, the cows were fed, and food was eaten.
They fed the cows.
So my guess is they saw Albert show up and they went like fucking booking out the back door and hoped he didn't see them because unless it was Albert. No,
I don't think it was Albert. No, Albert seems like an innocent. He seems like an innocent man. I trust Albert. He was just there to fix the wood chopper.
More than 100 suspects have been questioned, with none ever turning up solid results. 100 suspects, yeah.
Did they find people in the woods?
Nope. Police initially theorized the motive to be robbery, but when a large sum of money and valuables were found pretty out in the open, they were like, no. The theory was dropped. Plus, if it was a robbery, the person wouldn't have stayed around. They would have taken the stuff and ran.
And it was just...
And maybe they wouldn't have lured people out. Yeah. Especially if they had keys to the house and clearly were able to operate.
Robberies don't usually end so fucked up.
Yeah, I mean,
like
obviously...
If you're, like, found, you don't just go ahead and just slaughter everyone. You, like...
If the person were living in the house for a couple days before it happened, then obviously they were able to move around and maneuver without anybody noticing them. They could have robbed the whole house and left.
I don't like that.
That reminds me of actually the movie You're Next.
Oh, my God.
When the guy was living in the closet for, like, a couple days.
Yeah.
Just so we could sneak out. That movie's so
fucking good.
Yeah, that is a solid movie. It doesn't start very well, but then it like shit really hits the fan.
And then you're just like, this bitch,
whoa.
She got the ending to that movie. That was the best. It's so funny.
So here are some theories and suspects. Carl Gabriel, who was Victoria's believed husband, well, her husband, who was believed to have been killed in World War I, but no body was ever recovered. Some believe that,
the widowed daughter. Okay. Yeah, I was like, wait a second.
That Joseph was the product of an incestuous relationship between Andreas and Victoria, and that was later confirmed that Joseph was a product of his mother and his grandfather. So Carl, upon finding this out, was motivated by the gross infidelity, and after exchanging his identity with a fallen comrade in the war, Carl killed the entire family out of revenge.
The entire family?
Yeah, because I guess that would have technically possibly been during the war that he would have found that out, because if she got pregnant, because Joseph was 2, she would have gotten pregnant towards the tail end of World War I. Yeah. I don't know when he was allegedly killed in World War I, though. If it was like the first week, obviously he didn't, he wasn't like, you know what, I'm just going to change my identity just in case some shit happens. The next and possibly most likely suspect is Lorenz Schlittenbauer, the guy who led the search party. I don't like
that last name.
The guy who led the search party that found the bodies, which is weird because 3 other people had already searched the farm and hadn't found anything. And, there was Albert and then his 2 sons. Anything? Yeah, and then he sent his sons, and then these guys
they didn't go inside the house, did they?
No, but I'm sure Albert could have gone into the barn pretty easily.
But he probably was being respectful and didn't want to...
Yeah, I mean, he thought that people were just gone for the day or something. So he had been in a short relationship with Victoria. Some people believe he was the father of Joseph, and he probably believed he was the father of Joseph.
He wasn't.
Yeah, gross. After finding the 4 bodies in the barn with his fellow searchers, he immediately went towards the house, which his compatriots noted his strange familiarity with. The searchers clearly heard him open the house's front door with a key. And he disturbed all the bodies at the scene, confounding the evidence.
Asshole.
So,
you're not supposed to touch.
And he was later so the farm was completely leveled, and there's now just a memorial to the family.
Yeah.
And in 1925, he was seen walking around the rubble, just kind of like looking around. So you can take that as he was the killer. Uh-huh. Or you can take that as this is a man who thought that his son was murdered. Okay. He had a key to the house because he thought that he was his son, and he visited regularly. Mm-hmm. He was familiar with the house because of that. And he was so obsessed with it because his son had died. And that's why he moved the bodies, is because he was looking for Joseph's body at first. And then he found it.
Okay.
There are just some random ones with not enough detail to really go into. The Gump brothers, Peter Weber, Andreas and Carl S. of Saddleburg, the Bickler brothers and George Siegel, and the Thaler brothers, all of whom were just people who randomly said, oh yeah, I did it, or randomly dropped a hint, or there was some small piece of evidence that might have linked them to the crime, or just being on the family farm at one point. So this case is truly terrifying, as you noted when you
I did not like that shit.
It's the footsteps. It's the footsteps. It's the small things like that. Footprints that get you. And lends itself to theatrics and dramatic retelling, almost seeming like a real-life urban legend. Like, you could tell that shit around a campfire and people would be like, oh, yeah, sure. Footsteps.
Footprints.
The brutality. Well, I was thinking the footsteps in the attic and then the footprints and stuff.
I thought that was like whispering coming from the attic.
It was whispering and like shuffling.
That the footprints freak me out more than the
actual
whispering?
Like. No. Because the whispering, you can be like, oh, well, that's just like.
It's just my cat.
Yeah. So.
Speaking to the ghosts of the house.
Yeah. After I wrote this one, I had a little trouble sleeping.
Oh.
The brutality of the crime, coupled with the lack of solid motivation, only add to its terror as well. There have been no solid leads in the history of the investigation, which is about to be 100 years old in a couple of years.
4 years.
And it's partially owed to the fact that a lot of the evidence, including the remains of the family, were apparently destroyed during the Allied bombings of Germany in World War II. So the family's heads were removed for examination afterwards.
The fuck?
Like by professionals.
Yeah, I know, but what the
and fuck? And then they got blown up by the British bombing Germany and Russia bombing everybody.
I got you.
It remains to this day one of the most famous unsolved mysteries in German history. Ugh. Like, we don't really know too much about it. You might hear, people might know it now because it's been covered in lore. It's been covered in like My Favorite Murder did an episode on it. So there are like some people who know about it, but in Germany apparently it's big.
Yeah.
I think they should make like a solid movie with it.
Okay.
Except also, like, who do you make the protagonist of that? You can't make it the dad because he's a fucking creep.
Yeah.
Maybe the 72-year-old mother. Or you can make it about Albert.
Yes, Albert just sounds like a good guy, and I hope nobody ever thought maybe he did it.
Okay, number 6. The double homicide of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman. So, at 12:10 a.m. on June 13th, 1994, Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman... I
don't like that. Oh, wait, no, I wasn't born yet. Never mind. A few months shy.
Discovered murdered outside of Brown's condo in Brentwood, LA, in California. Brown had been stabbed multiple times in the head and neck, and defensive wounds were found on her hands. The stabs to her throat were so severe that her larynx could be seen through them, and her C3 vertebra right here at the back of your head had even been cut. It was a wonder that her head even stayed on her body. Police said it was hanging on by basically nothing.
Let's not say that. Guys, guess who did it?
They'd both been dead for 2 hours before their discovery by someone, I think, who was walking her dog. Police immediately traveled to the house of someone you may know, Orenthal James Simpson, a.k.a. O.J. the Juice Simpson, to inform him of her death and out of fear that he may have been targeted or injured as well. They did not find him there and were informed by Cato Kalin, who was living in Simpson's pool house at this point, that he had left earlier that night for a flight to Chicago that he was late for. That was around 10 o'clock. 10:30, actually, I think, something like that. So, you know.
Yeah.
Within the 2 hours.
I've seen a lot of stuff about this one.
Actually, in American Crime Story, Cato Kalin is played by the guy who plays the prince in Into the Woods and then the dumb friend in Game Night. And I'm like, that's perfect. Theories / suspects. This is mainly going to be one suspect here.
Yep.
O.J. Simpson. So Simpson was Brown's ex-husband. Police discovered a leather glove on Simpson's property, matching one found at the crime scene. The glove at Simpson's house was covered in blood belonging to both Brown and Goldman. Simpson agreed to turn himself in after a warrant for his arrest was put out, but instead attempted to flee to Mexico.
In the slowest car chase
in his
ever.
white Ford Bronco, armed, and also...
Did you listen to like the phone call?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Oh my God.
I watched it while I was researching. With a disguise, a pretty shitty disguise too, and $8,750 in cash. He eventually gave himself up though, and then Simpson was investigated multiple times during their marriage in the past for domestic abuse charges. In fact, one time Brown called the police, said he's gonna fucking kill me, because she was like terrified. Brown and Goldman's blood, hair, and fibers were found in Simpson's car and home. Now it makes sense why it would be in his car and why Brown's stuff would be, maybe not blood, but hair and fibers in his car and his house because they were married. But Goldman, no.
And as we've learned,
he was just a waiter and
hair
probably
just
her boyfriend
lingers
at the
for
time.
a while.
Bloody shoe prints were found at the scene, matched a pair of shoes allegedly owned by Simpson. There were pictures of him wearing them. These were an extremely rare type of shoe as well, and only 29 pairs were sold within the U.S. now.
Wow.
Simpson had purchased a 12-inch stiletto knife 6 weeks prior to the murders. Brown had called a women's shelter 4 days prior to her murder, claiming she was scared and that she believed Simpson was stalking her. He was found responsible, quote, for Goldman's death and battery against Brown in a civil suit, not a criminal charge, brought forward by the victims of the families, and he was ordered to pay something like $80 million, and he has barely paid any of that. He's in jail now anyway, so that doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah, and he might have a daughter.
He has many daughters.
No.
Oh.
Specific famous
Okay,
daughter.
well, we'll get to that in a sec.
That's a possibility.
But as we all know, Simpson was acquitted by the jury after 4 hours of deliberation in his criminal case. Many blame this on Simpson's dream team of lawyers, including a certain Robert Kardashian, Johnny Cochran, and F. Lee Bailey. Some also blame the exhaustion of the jury after spending basically a year or more on the case, living in a hotel with no TVs.
I'm not going to lie. I'm not that upset with the jury for being exhausted. I'd be.
Yeah, they were living in a hotel with no TVs. They weren't allowed to read magazines or any kind of news because they couldn't be corrupted.
What do they do? Play Scrabble?
Live in a hotel and not get paid that much money.
Yeah. I've never had to do jury duty.
He later wrote a book called If I Did It, which gave a very detailed account of the crime from Simpson's perspective, like a hypothetical. Also, there's just so much to go over here. Watch American Crime Story and come back if you want to know all of it, because I'm not going to get... This is a year.
There's so many things on it. And then the one with Sarah Paulson in it.
That's American Crime Story.
Okay. I just love Sarah
There's
Paulson.
also a belief that officers Mike Furman and Philip Vanader framed Simpson in a racially charged act of framing him.
Okay.
Some suspect convicted murderer Glenn Edward Rogers. Rogers' brother recounts hearing his brother talking about meeting Brown and, to quote, taking her down a few days before the murders. Rogers claimed that he was hired by Simpson to steal from Brown, but was also told he may kill her if he was found doing so.
Jesus Christ.
There's also Jason Simpson, one of OJ's sons, but not one of Brown's sons.
Did they have shared children together?
Two, yeah.
Two, okay.
This is a theory by Bill Deere, who was a private investigator who has been inducted into the Police Hall of Fame and is one of the few private investigators to ever be inducted. Induced, I don't know.
Inducted.
Induced
is when you're trying to go into labor. I don't think that's what he was trying to do.
Jason Simpson once attacked a former employee with a knife. He attacked his former girlfriends as well, including throwing one girlfriend into a bathtub, almost breaking her back in the process, and cutting off her hair with a knife. So he was a fan of knives. Medical records.
That's like my nightmare because I already have a bad back. Yeah. I really like my hair.
Show that he was diagnosed with intermittent rage disorder and had stopped taking his prescribed meds around the time of the murder. His alibi is that he was working at a restaurant, but his time card was handwritten for that day, despite the fact that the restaurant's time clock was fully functional. This would also explain that, he believes that OJ knew of his son's involvement and may have even been present for the altercation, thus explaining his bizarre behavior, the evidence on OJ's property, the shoe mark, everything.
The things belonging to him.
And it would make sense why he would say that he was innocent, but still seem like he was guilty of something at the time. So that's one of the explanations.
I don't know. I mean, I think
this is one of the most famous unsolved, but probably solved cases in American history.
Definitely solved.
It captured the attention of the nation for over a year and is still discussed 20 years later.
I mean, when did the movie or the specials come out?
The American Crime Story, 2015.
Yeah.
That was covered.
It's like 3 years ago.
It was huge. It was huge news. I was alive. I wasn't.
You weren't alive. I wasn't born alive. Yet. I was gonna.
Also, bonus tragedy. Jesus. It is responsible for the Kardashians, so we got to throw that one on there.
Yeah.
Number 5. This is one you're probably very familiar with. The tragedy of JonBenet Ramsey.
Yes, I am, because I recently watched Tom Harlock's
video. He does a very good video on it. Tom Harlock, go check him out.
And also, I just I knew of the tale.
Yeah, everyone, a lot of people know. All these pretty iconic. On December 26th, 1996, at 5:25 a.m., Patsy Ramsey frantically called the local police department in Boulder, Colorado, claiming she'd found a ransom note demanding $118,000 for the return of her and her husband John's daughter, multiple child pageant beauty whatever. Child beauty pageant winner, JonBenet Ramsey.
Yes, named for her father. And her middle name was Patricia for her mother.
I know parents like that. We all know parents like that. Police immediately went to the wealthy family's home in Boulder and began searching. They couldn't find much at first because they weren't really looking for anything because they thought that she had been kidnapped. Responding officer Rick French actually went into the basement of the house, but made a huge mistake when he opted not to look behind a latched wooden door leading to the family's wine cellar. Wine cellar. There's a lot of rooms in the wine cellar.
You have to go through. It's either you went through the boiler room to get to the wine cellar or the wine cellar to get to the boiler room. Something like that. Yeah. There was a door. He didn't open it because he was like, I don't need to because I'm looking for evidence. I'm not looking for anything. Like, she's been kidnapped. She's not going to be here. So the lengthy ransom note, very long ransom note, very detailed. 352 words or something like that. Most would be maybe
like
15
50
and under.
Claimed the kidnappers were motivated by anti-American sentiment and wanted to hurt John as he was a successful businessman whose company had become a subsidiary of Lockheed Martin. It also said the kidnappers would reach out between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. later that morning with more specific instructions. They did not. Didn't happen. Also,
the Ramseys were acting
very weird. So
opening mail and just
officers had John and a family friend help them search the house. Only JonBenet's bedroom had been cordoned off before this, as police initially, so after 10 a.m., they started really investigating, as police initially believed it to be the only area that needed to be protected from contamination. A victims advocate group also arrived at the home to help ease the family through the transition. They moved items and cleaned in the house, possibly destroying evidence in the process. John and his friend Fleet White started their search in the basement. They opened the latch wooden door that Officer French didn't go behind earlier to discover JonBenet's body. Her mouth was covered in duct tape, a nylon cord was wrapped around her wrists and neck, and her torso was covered by a white blanket. John immediately picked up her body and brought it upstairs. Dumbass. All three Ramseys, they also had a son named Burke, who was 9 at the time, gave the police writing, blood, and hair samples for elimination prints.
You didn't say how old JonBenet was?
Sorry, she was 6.
At least I didn't.
I didn't. I'm sorry. Did I? No, I didn't.
Okay. Go on. They gave samples?
The Ramseys the parents were interviewed for 2 hours that day, and Burke was interviewed at some point during the subsequent weeks, very, very soon after the murder. An autopsy showed JonBenet had been killed through a combination of strangulation and blunt force trauma to the skull, ruling the death a homicide. Her stomach contained remnants of a fruit or vegetable similar to pineapple as well.
And milk.
Not mixed together. It was just a bowl of pineapple.
It was like a thing.
Because apparently that's like a challenge, like people do. Like you try to eat pineapple mixed with milk.
No, apparently like the kids enjoyed that for snacks sometimes. Gross. Pineapple and milk.
And so here are some theories and suspects. An unknown intruder did it. An un-ID'd boot mark was found in the basement of the Ramseys' home. Someone broke into the Ramseys' house through a basement window. One of the basement windows was broken. The intruder subdued JonBenet with a stun gun, killed her, dumped her body, and left a ransom note to allow ample time to escape. Suspects include their neighbor Bill McReynolds, ex-housekeeper Linda Hoffman Pugh, Michael Helgoth, who committed suicide shortly after JonBenet's death, and a man named John Mark Carr, who claimed to have killed her, but was let go due to a lack of evidence linking him to the crime and the fact that he wasn't even in Boulder on the apparent night of JonBenet's death. The other theory is that it was John, Patsy, and or Burke Ramsey.
I think it was John.
The FBI claims that when a child dies, it is a 12-to-1 probability it was a close family member or caregiver. Or is
murdered, not dies. Because kids can die of cancer and shit.
True.
So I'm just saying murder.
The ransom note was found to have been initially drafted and written on a pad of paper found in the home with a marker found in the home. Many investigators believe it was Patsy who wrote it. It also explains... It
was very clear that there had been several
drafts. Yeah. And also that explains the fact that it was $118,000, which is a very specifically small amount of money for this kind of crime.
And also just specific.
Because it would have been like Patsy would have known, well, John, because he went and got the money.
Oh, what would easily be.
That they could, quote, just like kind of throw away in this case.
Yeah.
Where was I? No real evidence of a forced entry into the home was found. It was Colorado, so it was snowing at this point. No footprints outside. And no footprints from the woods.
I know stuff about this one. And the window that was broken doesn't look like anybody even went through it because there were a bunch of cobwebs and stuff and none of them were disturbed or anything. Yeah. Like they were still very clearly like over where the entrance of like the grate was.
The Ramseys were unusually uncooperative in helping to solve the murder of their child, and the parents refused to be interviewed by police unless it was by their own strict terms. Burke's fingerprints were found on a bowl of pineapple left out in the Ramsey home. This goes back to the fact that pineapple was found in her stomach, even though Patricia Ramsey insists that she didn't feed her pineapple.
Because she was asleep when they got home and just put them in bed.
Yep. Audio forensics have suggested that Patsy Ramsey may be heard saying, "Oh, Jesus, what did you do? How could you do this?" to someone at the end of her 911 call. Some people just think she's just saying, "Oh, Jesus, over and over again," like, "Oh, God."
I think she's yelling at one of them.
Yeah, she could be yelling at some of the others. They hired a PR firm hours after JonBenet's disappearance. The body hadn't even been found yet, and they got a PR firm. Who the fuck
Weren't
does
they
that?
like? Wasn't John like opening mail and just like kind of doing
living life? Yeah. John picking up JonBenet's body and contaminating the crime scene of the discovery of her body. Now, having been someone who has been the first person on the scene at a crime scene when my house was broken into, I kind of give him a little bit of leeway because I was not thinking at the time not to be touching stuff. I was like pretty emotional. I wasn't like crying, but I was like,
child, so like you want to go,
I was like looking around the house for stuff that might be missing, and I was touching stuff. I was moving stuff. I was being kind of an idiot at the time.
Yeah. And also like when you see your child, like
it, but also
you want to run.
He should have known not to move the body.
Also, what was I going to say?
A Colorado grand.
And wasn't like based on when she should have like been like killed and the actual like state of her wasn't like completely off.
Yeah.
Like she should have been.
But also that could be explained by the fact she was in a Colorado basement in the middle of winter. That preserves bodies weirdly. Where was I? Oh, a Colorado grand jury voted to indict the parents in 1999, but were turned down when the DA claimed that there wasn't enough evidence to do so. Patsy died in 2006. And the DA has claimed that newly minted DNA analysis completely absolved the Ramseys of any guilt, but others have questioned this move. There's a really good South Park episode.
Oh, God.
It's the one that's all about Butters. Where Butters' parents go crazy and his mom tries to kill him.
Oh, I have seen
And then
that one.
the Ramseys show up to support her parents. Butters' parents, his parents. And I'm just explaining it for the podcast. And they're like, "Oh, yeah, some Puerto Rican guy definitely killed our JonBenet as well." And O.J. Simpson shows up as well, saying that some Puerto Rican guy killed his wife and her boyfriend. Because that's what Butters' parents say was responsible for Butters' death. And then at the end, they say, "No, we tried to kill our son. He's alive. But every day, if he had died, people would have seen me in the," this is his dad talking, "would have seen me in the grocery store, and they would have just been thinking to themselves, "Liar, you knew what you did." And it just cuts to JonBenet's parents like, "You killed your kid. How could you do this?" And it was like, and they would see my wife and they would be saying hi on the outside, but inside they would just be thinking murderer. And it cuts to O.J. Simpson. It is so beautiful. Such a good episode. I think they did it. It's so obvious.
It was like Burke. I'm like,
it could have been all of them. It could have been. It could have been Burke as an accident, just and like, then Jesus. Some people think that it was Burke who initially hit her,
head, and then the dad.
Yeah, either
put, like, the
or
rope
Patricia
around her neck to kind of,
or that she wasn't dead and they were going to like stage it, and she was still alive, and whatever parent was staging it just killed her then because they were like, it was too far gone.
And then
tells everyone about
anything. She was 6. She wasn't like complete, like she'd be able to tell a story.
I mean, this is just another incredibly prolific case in American history, and another that is still discussed and theorized to death nowadays. That's why it's on the list. The confounding evidence in the case and conflicting stories given by so many involved also add to its head-scratching nature. For some, it is frustratingly obvious that it was probably a member of the Ramsey family, but for others, it's clearly not. It was probably someone else. We don't know. Either way.
And the neighbors like heard someone scream in the middle of the night. But
that gives to the intruder.
Didn't hear anything else. Yeah, I was going to say, but then didn't hear anything else, so they just kind of brushed it off. Specifically, they said they heard a child scream. Yeah.
Either way, given JonBenet's age and the brutality of her death, that just adds on to the true tragedy of the crime. Really. Yeah. I mean, no matter which way you spin it, a girl died. That's sad. Number 4.
Is it the flower one? That's what I was thinking of. Is that one on here?
Probably.
You know what I mean.
Number 4. The Ketty Cabin Killings.
Is this The Strangers?
This is the one that The Strangers was based off of. So this one's also pretty...
I made Dan watch this movie, The Strangers, that's like based off of this story, and I told
Under
him
the
and
pretense
other friends that no, it wasn't like that jumpy or anything.
Or scary.
They were like shitting themselves the entire time. Meanwhile, I had seen the movie at least like 5 times, so I was like pretty much... Still freaks me out, but like... It was a little bit better, like, being able to just, like, watch them react to it. So if you do watch it, you're gonna fucking jump and shit. That's all. Sorry, friends. Not sorry to you, Dan. It was really funny.
Anyway, where was I? Sorry. Ketty Cabin Killings. Mm-hmm. On April 12th, 1981, at 7 a.m., 14-year-old Sheila Sharp returned to her home, Cabin 28 in Ketty, California, after spending the night next door with family friends. Her 2 younger brothers, Rick and Greg, and their friend Justin Smart were asleep in one of the back rooms of the cabin, but sprawled out in the cabin's now blood-soaked living room were the bodies of her mother, Sue, 15-year-old brother John, and John's 17-year-old friend Dana Wingate. Sheila's younger sister, 14-year-old Tina, was missing. Sheila ran back to the family's friend's cabin, where she got the father, James Siebold, to return to her family's cabin with her. He aided the 3 boys in the back room out of the bedroom window so that they wouldn't have to see the living room. Yeah. Each of the victims was bound at the hands and legs with wire. Sue was gagged with her own panties and tape, and she was naked from the waist down but covered in a blanket. Sue suffered multiple stab wounds to the chest, was hit in the head with the butt of a rifle, and had her throat slashed. John's throat was also slashed, and Dana suffered multiple head injuries and was manually strangled. All 3 victims received multiple blows to the head from a hammer or hammers. Whew. Sheila and the Sieboldts had not heard any commotion during the night. They were right next door. It is believed that there was more than one perpetrator. Justin actually claimed to have witnessed the altercation, saying it was 2 men, one with a mustache.
Justin was...
One of the boys' friends, the 2 younger brothers, their friend Justin Smart.
Okay, they were the ones in the background.
He said one had a mustache and one was clean-shaven with long hair. Both were wearing glasses.
But I thought that they were sleeping in the back room.
Some say that they were asleep. Some say that they weren't asleep.
Maybe they were just
during
like
the altercation. They might have just fallen asleep after. Yeah.
Oh, because they were like hiding.
But it's weird. They weren't locked in that room. And they weren't
They were just like left alone?
Or killed, yeah. That actually goes into one of the theories. Right. So he said that these 2 men were with Sue when Dana and John got home and a fight broke out. Dana and John had actually been in the town, and because Ketty was pretty remote. It has like a population of 60 people or something. Mm-hmm. They were in a nearby town. They hitchhiked back later that night.
Did they have a car?
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Well, they were 15, 17, and they lived
Oh, sorry. I thought that you were talking about the dad and the daughter.
They lived in the cabin because Sue had escaped her kind of abusive husband, and they were not very rich, so they just got this cabin, which was actually it was tiny. Anyway, Tina allegedly came home to this altercation happening and was taken out of the cabin's back door by one of the men. And then
the missing one.
Justin said that he saw them all get killed.
Okay.
Nothing was stolen. The crime scene was truly horrific. One officer described it. He said, "They stabbed and pounded on everything in visible sight. The walls, the people, the furniture, everything. There was blood sprayed absolutely everywhere. You knew right away we were involved with a psychopath. The blinds were all drawn and the lights were off as well when Sheila got home."
Okay.
In fact, a steak knife was found on the scene, believed to be one of the murder weapons, was used with such force that its blade had been bent at a 25-degree angle. So it was just like...
Yeah, Jesus.
I mean, it's a steak knife.
Just Jesus.
Yeah. Investigations turned up nothing, and that was partially due to a contaminated crime scene, as both Sheila and James had entered the living room at some point.
Well, they had to.
Yeah. 3 years after the murders, fragments of Tina's skull and jaw were discovered 100 miles away from Ketty, the missing daughter. An anonymous caller identified the bones as Tina's, but that call tape was never admitted into evidence. I heard the tape. He calls and he's like, you know, that, like the bones they just found? Do you think it was one of those, that girl that was missing from what happened in Ketty? And then a year later, it was confirmed to be hers through DNA evidence.
Ooh, I don't like that shit.
Theories/suspects. This is one I might get a little bit passionate about. Kind of like OJ, kind of like the Zodiac.
Okay.
Back when we were covering that. Because this is another one that's pretty fucking obvious. Okay. Martin Smart and John Beatty.
Wait, should it be obvious from what I know of the story?
No.
Okay, that's
from what I go over.
That's what I was going to say. I was like, wait, what? Should it be obvious to me right now?
Martin Smart, Justin Smart's father.
The friend?
Yes.
Okay.
Who was in the back room, completely safe. So Marilyn Smart claimed that she believed her husband and his friend were responsible for the horrific crime.
Did she leave him? I would be so scared for my
Marilyn
life.
claimed to have found Tina's bloody jacket in her basement and turned it over to the police, but no official record exists of this happening, unfortunately. Martin Smart told police that a claw hammer had been stolen from his home, and in 2016, they're still investigating it. A hammer matching the description of the one Martin lost, quote, was found in a local pond near where the cabin used to be. It's since been wrecked.
Yeah.
A lot of these places have since been wrecked.
Well, because what do you
Who the fuck would want to stay there?
You know?
Martin would often provide the investigators with tips, clues, and evidence somewhat overzealously. Some think it was to throw them off the scent. He'd be like, "Oh yeah, I remember that night. I heard, etc." Or, "I saw a guy."
Wait, how close did they live to the...
They were within the community.
Okay.
So on the night of the crimes, Marilyn left her husband and Beau at a local bar at 11 p.m. They'd actually gone to Sue's cabin earlier that night.
Beau again?
His friend.
Okay.
To see if she wanted to come out with them, but since she was with the boys, she said, "I can't."
Okay. Sleepover.
That was around 9 p.m. And then Marilyn awoke at 2 a.m. to the two of them, Martin and Beau, burning something in the wood stove. She said that Martin hated John Sharp with a passion. That was the son. After the murders, Martin immediately drove to Reno, Nevada, and sent a letter to Marilyn that concluded with, "I've paid the price." Oh, it was kind of ruminating about their marriage and everything.
Okay.
It said, "I've paid the price of your love, and now I've bought it with 4 people's lives."
What the?
Martin told a counselor he regularly visited that he'd killed Sue and Tina, but didn't kill the boys, and only had killed Tina because she'd, quote, witnessed the whole thing. So this explains why Justin...
Beau killed the...
Probably. Yeah. This explains why Justin and the boys weren't harmed, and why Justin would give so many conflicting testimonies. He said so many different things over the years. He wouldn't want to
get his father
in
trouble.
Beau had ties to organized crime in Chicago. Unfortunately, Martin died of cancer in 2000, and Beau died in Chicago in 1988. So both of them are dead. So we'll never really know. Others say that it was a local drug dealer seeking revenge after Dana had stolen a bunch of LSD off of him. This has not been confirmed that he even stole the LSD from him. Or that it was a mafia hit that was covered up by local police.
Or that it was completely random. That isn't like a theory at all?
Possibly.
Okay.
But
just you never know.
Yeah, I mean, they even investigated kind of like serial killers who were known in the area, but both of them...
They're like, no, that one wasn't me.
No, they both claimed it, but they were investigated. No links. So why this is on the list. This event is the definition of horrifying and brutal, and clearly had some personal motivation behind it, given the unplanned nature of the crime and disturbing crime scene.
Just how violent it was.
It was clearly unplanned. It was unorganized.
But it was a crime of
passion. This is still in the public conscious today and is actively being investigated. The latest break in the case came in April of 2018, earlier this year.
Seriously?
When police stated that DNA evidence that had recently been taken from a piece of tape at the crime scene matched that of a known living suspect. So within a year from now, we could know who did this, actually, which is pretty crazy. In fact, it served as the inspiration for the film The Strangers and its sequel from earlier this year as well.
Oh, yeah. So I didn't hate that sequel.
There's the cultural impact for you. Yeah, I mean, it's just like so mysterious, and it's so brutal. And it's like, why did nobody hear this happening when clearly these people were being beaten and stabbed to death? It's obviously pretty clear it was two people, because there's no way that one guy, even if he was in the process of killing Sue, if two young boys came in, he probably wouldn't have been able to overpower both of them. Yeah. Especially one of them was 17. He's basically a guy, like a man at that point.
An adult. Damn.
Number three and number two, we're going to go through very quickly because I've already touched upon them. Number 3? Yep.
That was number 4?
Yep.
Wow, okay.
Number 3 is the notorious Jack the Ripper. We previously covered this, so I'm just going to go over the basics. He was a murderer in
it's an international one.
Whitechapel, in England in 1886. He canonically killed 5 prostitutes, but it's believed he probably killed more than that. There are tons of suspects. Go back and listen to the serial killers episode if you want to hear me go really in depth on that. So why he's on the list. So his mystery and status as one of the most prolific serial killers of all time propel him to this spot on the list. It's even more frustrating given the fact if these crimes were committed today, he'd probably be found in a heartbeat. They were pretty disorganized. Yeah. It's a classic case of Monday morning quarterbackism. The brutality of his crimes also adds to the infamous legend of Jack the Ripper. Shit like that didn't really happen at that point in time.
It was just kind of like a simple...
He wrote letters to the police, which has been replicated tons of times by other serial killers. He basically
to do that?
No, I don't think so. I can't say with any confidence that he was, but
started like the popularity.
That's very famous for writing his 3 canonical letters.
The definites, and then there were also
the one that's like, dear boss.
Yeah.
Me.
Okay, go on.
His look is often replicated and or referenced on screen portrayals of killers, like, kind of mysterious guy, cloak upturned, hat on. That's what he was portrayed as.
What you just described to me sounded like Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah. And even how the general public perceives serial killers over 100 years after his killings. Basically, everyone and their mum has a Jack the Ripper theory that they subscribe to. Some people think that he was H.H. Holmes. Some people think that he was a member of the royal family.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah, Queen Victoria's son, one of her sons.
Okay. Number 2,
the terror of the Zodiac Killer. Previously covered already. Just go over the basics. He was a serial killer in the 60s and 70s in San Francisco. He had 7 victims, 2 of which survived, 5 of which were killed. He mostly used a gun, but for one of his killings, he did use a knife up close and personal. He tried to kill a lady once and her baby, but she yeeted out of that car and escaped, thankfully, and she and her baby were fine.
She fucking yeeted, you're right. So is number 1 what I thought?
I'm just going to go over why the Zodiac Killer was on the list. Again, he's one of the most mysterious and infamous serial killers of all time.
It's not that mysterious anymore. We all know who it was. It's Ted Cruz, guys.
I personally don't believe him to be that mysterious, as I'm
not trying to joke about a murderer, but it was Ted Cruz.
Firmly in the camp that it was 100% Arthur Lee Allen. Go back to the serial killers episode and hear me rant about that.
Fine. Ted Cruz's father was the Zodiac Killer.
He had a prolific reign of terror and a serious grasp on the livelihood of San Francisco in the 1960s and 70s. No one's really been able to kind of replicate that since, except maybe the sniper killers in Washington, D.C. in the early 2000s.
They don't have to replicate it,
Exactly. You
don't gotta.
I mean, he was almost immediately immortalized in movies. Now they're making
much like movie remakes that we don't need. We don't need another one of these either.
Another Zodiac? Oh, no. The Zodiac movie's so good, though.
Another person like him. Jesus Christ.
Well, I was saying he was the inspiration for the serial killer in the Dirty Harry movies, the first one. There's a great movie by David Fincher called Zodiac about him.
We talked about all these movies in the previous.
In fact, in that movie, a different actor plays him in each scene that he appears in to keep it like with the creepiness.
All right.
Even if he were operating today, I'm not sure he would have been caught. His impact is also still felt in American culture nowadays, with many purporting their own Zodiac theory. And number 1.
Am I right?
The infamous Black Dahlia case.
Okay, because I completely didn't think about it until we like sat down to record, and I was like, wait, I do know of it.
So here's the story. On the morning...
Real quick, they covered it on American Horror Story, and I recently rewatched the first season, and that's when that is...
Who's the... Do you like know who the killer is in the show?
Yeah, but it's one of like the characters. It's not like an actual like person. It's Charles Montgomery, and she's played by somebody. You keep going. I'll tell you who she's played by. I just can't think of her name.
On the morning of January 15th, 1947. Well, I'm talking to you here.
I know. I'm listening. She's from American Pie.
American Pie.
The girl
is
who
it Shannon Elizabeth?
No, the one who plays her in
Tara
Reid? No.
Reid.
You're about to say Tara Strong.
Yeah, I was.
No. Wait, is it her? Wait. No, I messed up. It's not her. I'm thinking of a different girl. Just you keep going. I'll tell you who.
On the morning of January 15th, 1947, Betty Bersinger left her home in Los Angeles to go on a walk with her 3-year-old daughter around the neighborhood. Unbeknownst to Betty, though, she would end up changing the course of American criminal history that day, because that was the day she found the body of Elizabeth Short, better known as the Black Dahlia. She was found naked, severed in half, and drained of all her blood in a vacant lot just down the street. You know how they mentioned that she was severed in half?
Yeah.
When I was on Wikipedia looking at this, without any warning, they have a picture of that.
What the fuck?
And
that's not okay.
I was scarred. I couldn't.
Oh, Mina Savari.
Oh, yeah.
She played her. Sorry.
Okay. She played Elizabeth Short?
Yeah. She is an American Pie. It's Heather.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she is.
I thought it wasn't her for a minute.
Okay. So along with being cut in half and drained of blood, Short's mouth, I wrote moth.
Her mouth?
Yeah, had been slashed open to her ears, kind of like Heath Ledger's Joker. And her body, Gamers Rise Up. And her body had been cleaned with gasoline by her killer. It was evidently clear that she had not been killed there because there was no blood. She was clearly dumped. Passers-by, news people, and police began to swarm the area soon after Bersinger called in the discovery, and this contaminated the crime scene immensely. Short was a waitress and aspiring actress at the time of her murder, and she'd gone missing on January 9th.
I knew that.
The killer, quote, called in to the Examiner on January 21st of that year, claiming he was going to turn himself in and send in souvenirs of the crime soon after. 3 days later, they received a package containing a cut-and-paste letter stating, "Here is Dahlia's belongings, letter to follow." Along with the note were Elizabeth's birth certificate, business cards, photographs, and an address book with the name Mark Hansen on the cover that had been cleaned with gasoline as well. Several fingerprints were lifted from these items by the FBI, but they were actually contaminated in transport and couldn't be properly examined. Mm-hmm. On January 26th, the Examiner received another letter, handwritten this time, stating, "Here it is, turning in Wednesday, January 29th, 10 a.m. Had my fun at police, Black Dahlia Avenger," along with the location the killer would turn himself in. He didn't turn himself in, obviously, and the Examiner got a letter at 1 p.m. on January 29th stating, "Have changed my mind. You would not give me a square deal. Dahlia killing was justified." And I just realized now, those are very reminiscent of how Donald Trump tweets.
Jesus Christ. Also, sorry, it wasn't Charles Montgomery on AHS. He is the one who did that to her after she was accidentally killed in the murder house. By a this is after the Montgomerys were already long dead and stuff. It was a dentist who lived there.
Gross.
And she went and was she was desperate for money, so she was at least this is an American Horror Story. Okay, this is not real life. Well, in the show, she was going because she was I just need money. I'll do anything. And he put her under, and then when that was done, he tried to wake her up, and she was just dead. And then the ghost of Charles Montgomery was like, "Don't worry, I can fix this." And he was a fucked up guy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, some people believe that she possibly could have been a prostitute at this time.
Yeah, it was kind of suggested that that's what
confirmed. Sorry. Theories and suspects. Over 150 men were interviewed and investigated as suspects, with none ever being charged. Some of these suspects include, I don't know if they were interviewed, but people believe that they possibly could have killed her. Woody Guthrie, who is a famous folk singer, and Orson Welles, the actor. Wow. So the first and most obvious suspect, Mark Hansen, the guy whose name is on the address book. Mm-hmm. He was a nightclub owner who Short lived with at his home on multiple occasions in 1946. She called him from San Diego on January 8th, and he was one of the last people to speak to her before her death and disappearance. Mm-hmm. Short had recently rebuffed Hansen's romantic advances. Hansen was believed to have spent some time at Sweden's medical surgical school, obviously because she was surgically cut in half. And like her innards were like taken out. It's so gross. I kept a lot of the grisly details out.
You just brought them up, so.
Well, there was one more, but I'm not going to say it.
You can tell me later.
She had... Hansen had no history of violence or criminal history and actually died naturally in 1964, so he was never charged. And then we get to the guy who I think did it, pretty obviously did it. Dr. George Hodel, maybe. What?
Oh, no, nothing. Okay. The way that you were saying the name.
So he was a doctor, medical doctor, specifically dealing with sexually transmitted diseases, but he would have had an innate knowledge of the human anatomy. He would have known how to cut someone in half and drain them.
OBGYN?
No, it was like specifically, no, not of women, just sexually transmitted diseases in general. His 14-year-old daughter accused him of molesting her in October of 1949. That was what initially brought police attention to him. Mm-hmm. He was brought under police surveillance in February and March of 1950 and was recorded saying, and I quote, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, they couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead. They thought there was something fishy. Anyway, now they may have figured it out. Killed her? Maybe I did kill my secretary."
What the
He's
fuck?
referring to Ruth Spalding, who died of an overdose in 1945, and Hodel was a suspect in her killing or her death as well.
Did you have to do that accent though?
That's like 1940s. I was thinking about reading it like Dennis Reynolds from Always Sunny because that's exactly how he talks. So like he basically admitted to this crime,
but was like, but can't do shit.
So Hodel's son, Steve, a former LAPD homicide detective, even suspects his father was the killer and believes that Short was a patient of his. He'd been his name is George, right? I didn't fuck that up. Yes, George. He'd been out all night at a, quote, party during the night of the murder. A nude photograph of a woman whose face recognition technology is 90 to 95% sure is definitely Short was found among Hodel's belongings. The motherfucker had a secret room that none of his kids were allowed to go into in his mansion. Steve is also believed that his father may have possibly been... George? Steve is the son.
Oh, okay.
George is the father.
Oh, okay.
May have possibly been the true Zodiac killer as well, given, the location and sending letters and shit. Some believe that Hodel's standing and money allowed him to pay off the police and muddy the case further, and thus keep himself out of the limelight.
Okay.
Other suspects include Walter Bailey, who was a surgeon who lived a block away from where Short was discovered and whose daughter was friends with Short's sister, Norman Chandler, Leslie Dillon, who was a bellhop and former mortician's assistant, Joseph Dumais, George Knowlton, Robert Manley, who was the last person seen with Short before her disappearance, although he was pretty quickly acquitted. Obviously, he didn't do it. Patrick O'Reilly and Jack Wilson. So why is this number one? This is probably the most famous unsolved murder in American history. Even you who don't really keep up with this stuff know of the Black Dahlia. American Horror
Story told me, and they even did that season came out in 2011, and when someone got murdered in the house, naturally, because that's what happens in Murder House, Dr. Montgomery made the boy Black Dahlia, and they dumped him in the exact same way.
Gross.
Yeah, it was Travis.
Who was that?
Just a boy who was in the show. He was dating Constance, Jessica Lange.
No.
He wanted to be an actor.
That's no good.
It was one of the most heavily covered post-war topics in U.S. news because this was 1947. It was literally right after the war. Mm-hmm. Now, this was after the war.
So they needed new things to talk about. This was like a big thing.
Yeah. This has inspired countless books, graphic novels, TV shows, video games. Yeah. The book Torso is about it. The video game L.A. Noire has a whole section dedicated to it. And movies, including one starring Josh Hartnett and Scarlett Johansson. Yeah.
I love him.
It's just called The Black Dahlia. It also has...
I'm in fact wanting to go back and finally finish Penny Dreadful. I only watched the first season.
It's so good.
I just love him.
And they're doing a follow-up series.
They are going to? Yeah.
Oh. It also has Hilary Swank and Two-Face from The Dark Knight, Aaron Eckhart in it. It's not that good, but it's fun to watch.
Who's Scarlett Johansson playing? One of the boy doctors?
No, she's playing an Asian woman.
Oh, okay.
No, she's just a femme fatale.
What was her most recent that they announced and everyone was livid?
A trans boy.
Yes, and everyone was like, Scarlett,
now
we don't want you to do this.
So I mean, that's just one of the most famous cases of all time. Practically
and
everybody knows about the Black Dahlia.
You can remember it.
It's creepy.
Yeah.
Whoever came up with that. Good job, man. Well, there's a movie called The Blue Dahlia that came out a little bit before the murders.
It's a flower, right?
Yeah.
Because American Horror Story, she was wearing a flower in her hair, and that's why.
I think it was just because before she was identified.
They were just kind of
there was just a name. She had black hair.
Yeah.
Her lips were probably black. It was gross. Yeah. That crime scene scarred me.
I don't need to see it, so thanks.
Yeah, you don't. You really don't.
Will I cry?
Probably.
Oh, God.
I mean, it also has that gross, grainy quality of old pictures and stuff.
I mean, I'm sure the actual picture is worse than the quality of it.
Yeah, but that just adds to it. If it was a high def camera photo, I'd be like, ew, gross. But the graininess adds creepiness to it.
No matter what. No matter what. Jesus.
Yeah. I mean, just the manner, the fact that the person was clearly had some form of draining a whole human.
So surgeon
or hunter or
fact
fisherman.
That they were that fucked up.
Yeah.
And were they interviewing hunters or fishermen?
I don't know. It's like Scream. Did they ask you if you like to hunt or fish? In Scream, when they're talking about how they were interviewed by the police, all the boys were like, yeah, they asked me if I like to go hunting because that's how you know how to gut something properly.
Oh, right, because Casey was, okay.
Gutted. Yeah.
I had to think about that. I was like, why the fuck would they ask that?
So that's my list. Those are 10 of the most mysterious, infamous unsolved murders in history. Probably the creepiest one, in my opinion, is the Hinterkaifeck. That was the most creepy. I think that's the oldest. Oh, I didn't tell you my theory.
Other than OJ, who's the most obvious?
I think I know.
That they definitely found the person.
Who's responsible for the Sodder Children? I don't know who's responsible for JonBenet Ramsey.
Was the Sodder Children the 10 family?
Yes.
Okay. JonBenet Ramsey?
They went missing Christmas Eve.
It's not Ramsey. Santa Claus.
It's Santa Claus.
Oh, no, it's Krampus.
It was Krampus.
Avery? Krampus.
Why would Krampus take or kill JonBenet, though? I don't think she was...
Because he's Krampus. Kid. Yeah, but remember, the bad stuff doesn't happen to the
mom heard stuff on the roof.
It happens
in the Sodder case.
It happens to the family members.
Yeah.
So maybe Burke was the one who was the bad kid.
I didn't mention in the Sodder family case with the billboard, it was literally we think the police are covering this up. Oh, it was a call out post. There's now a memorial, I think.
I have no idea what I'm doing next week.
Well, we'll figure it out. Well, it's going to be December, so. Ding, ding, ding,
ding, ding, ding. Can we ask Sasha to draw us some Santa hats to put on our icons?
I can just Photoshop those on.
No, I want quality.
Quality?
Yeah. All right. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode.
If you listened this long, thank you.
This is probably our second longest after the Marvel episode.
Fuck, that was long. Oh my God, I can't do that ever again.
When Infinity War comes out, I got to do my Redux.
No. All right, guys, thank you for listening. You're real champs.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if you got creeped out.
Sorry, not Infinity War. When Infinity War Part 2, Avengers 4 comes out. Still not named. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Thank you so much for listening to 10 for 10. Be sure to follow us on Twitter, where we are at 10 for 10 pod.
On
Be sure
all
to
the things.
Like us on Facebook, just 10 for 10 podcast. Email us 10for10pod@gmail.com. Follow us on Spotify, iTunes, and Podbean. Be sure to leave us a review on each of those things if you can. I don't think you can review stuff on Spotify. That's okay.
No,
but a review on iTunes
to it and then it will
it's beautiful. We love it. I actually haven't checked to see if there are any new ones, so I apologize if you have written one. I'll be sure to read it next week. My voice hurts now, and I have to edit this and get it out.
I don't think there's much. Thank you guys. I have to pee, so goodbye.
Is there anything else we forgot to do?
No,
okay.
just I have to pee. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a fantastic week, and Merry Christmas already.
Happy end of November.
Merry Krampus.
Goodbye.
Bye.
This podcast is part of the Shrimp Queen Network.
Visit facebook.com/Shrimp Queen Network to see more great podcasts.
Hear them.
Hear more great podcasts.
Good job.
Thanks for listening.